Alright, so the story for The Amazing Spider-Man, the video game, takes place right after the movie ends, and you actually play as Peter Parker right in the beginning, and you're hanging out with Gwen Stacy in Oscorp, where she works as a scientist, and she's showing off all these creatures, like these cross-species as they call them, like a bunch of lizard dudes and scorpions and a rhino dude. Yeah, you see where this is going. And then out of nowhere, because of course Peter Parker is Spider-Man and he himself is somewhat of a cross-species, every one of these creatures notice that he's there and they all bust out, and when they bust out they actually unleash a virus which actually infects everybody in New York City. So now Peter Parker slash Spider-Man has to go and of course find a cure to save everybody in New York City and stop all these creatures that escaped Oscorp and of course bring them back. Now there is a little bit more to the story here and there, but just to avoid spoilers because this is a sequel to the movie, I just won't mention them at all. But I will say this, the story is actually very entertaining in the game, mostly because of the characters. Spider-Man is witty and funny and is always cracking jokes, which Spider-Man should. Other characters like Gwen Stacy and a couple others that I will not mention because it might be spoilers, are a lot of fun too. And also some of the enemies that you fight and you see in the game, you know, it's just cool to see them. So it's very entertaining to see who's going to come next, who you're going to fight next. And just overall, it's a generic story, but it's still a lot of fun. So overall, there you go. I like the story, even though it is somewhat generic. Let's go on to the sound. Alright, now let's talk about the sound. Voice acting wise, nobody from the movie reprises their roles. Surprise! But whoever they got to voice Spider-Man, I have to commend him because he did a damn good job in this. He's funny, very witty, very energetic. He sounds like Spider-Man slash Peter Parker. He does a good job. Everybody else does a great job as well, but I'm not going to go through all the, characters because again, I don't want to spoil it, but everybody else did a good job as well. But now the sound design and the soundtrack, on the other hand, I'd say this. The sound design does an okay job, only because when you're whooshing through the environments with your webs, of course, and you just hear the wind pass you while you're like just flying around in the city, it sounds good, and all the environmental stuff in the city, like all the cars beeping and people talking. So that's good, but one problem I have is when you're punching and kicking enemies, you'll hear the same punches and kicks over and over again, and it gets repetitive. Also, the soundtrack is basic movie game soundtrack. It's very forgettable, nothing amazing. So overall, I think the sound does a good job for the most part, especially with the voice acting. Let's go on to the graphics. So graphically, The Amazing Spider-Man actually does a damn good job with its city. I mean, the city is very well detailed, it's very shiny looking, that's one thing I noticed. And when you're whipping through the environments with your webs, of course, it looks really nice while you're just passing through stuff. The animations are great for Spider-Man. It looks very lively on the streets. It looks really damn good. But my main problem is that most of the game, I'll talk about this in gameplay, most of the game takes place in really drab and boring looking buildings, and that's a real big problem. Because when you're in like tunnels and sewers and office buildings, it just doesn't look all that great or appealing or even that pretty. But when you are like whooping around in the city and shooting enemies and fighting off big creatures and stuff, it's really damn good looking. So overall, graphically, it's hit or miss. I would say it's more hit though, because the city is so good looking. So let's go on to the gameplay. Now let's talk about the gameplay, and wowee, this game is of course a open world Spider-Man game, and some of the best Spider-Man games out there are definitely open world. Spider-Man 2 and Web of Shadows being my two favorite Spider-Man games, besides this one. This one is actually a damn good Spider-Man game, especially when you're just roaming around the city, doing little side missions like fighting off crime and stopping bank robbers in a car and stuff. Just doing all that stuff while whipping around and actually feeling like Spider-Man while you're doing all this stuff, it really is a lot of fun. And what makes the swinging around much more fun and much more immersive is the camera angles, which actually follows Spider-Man all the time, and it always sticks by him real close, especially when he's just like falling to the ground and he's almost about to hit the ground and you decide, you know what, now I'm going to whip out, and whoosh, now you're swinging again, and it looks so awesome. It's so much fun. And also what Beenox introduces into this game is a new way to swing around the city, and it's called the Web Rush ability, which actually slows down time, makes you see through Spider-Man's eyes, and whatever point you pick on the map, you will automatically swing to that location. So if you pick like a part of a building on the side, you select it, you let go of it, and then it'll just automatically send you there. And it's pretty freaking awesome, especially while you're in combat. You can still use this to like whip around the environment and try to get your enemies and stuff, and it works really damn good in the game. So while swinging around in the city is a lot of fun, you do have to have a combat system. And what the guys at Beenox decided to do here is make it a free flow combat system, just like Batman Arkham Asylum and Arkham City and even that Captain America game that came out. And this free flow combat system actually works really damn good with Spider-Man, just using some of your web abilities like jumping over their heads and then just pressing the B button and like whipping some web into them and then throwing them against the wall and then beating up another guy and like freaking smashing him against the wall with some web and stuff. It's actually a lot of fun just to do all this stuff, and it's really simple. It might not be as good as Batman, but it does a decent job. So the combat is a lot of fun. They also add a stealth mechanic in the game, which I thought was kind of weird for a Spider-Man game. Here you can stick to walls, of course, and climb up them, and taking out multiple enemies without anybody ever noticing. It's a very simple stealth mechanic. I mean, there's no gadgets or anything that you use, but, you know, for what it is, it's a lot of fun. Now, even though I have been really positive with the gameplay so far, there is one complaint that I consider major, and that is during the story missions and even some of the side missions, most of the time you'll be in buildings, and in closed off environments like this, sometimes when you're fighting enemies, like the camera will get wonky, and while you're swinging around, it will just get really closed off and annoying. It's not a good environment setting for a Spider-Man game. But when it does open up and you're fighting big robots and stuff while swooping around in the city and you're shooting weak points with your webs, it becomes a lot of fun. And some of the side missions and stuff while you're just like fighting off crime in the city is a lot of fun as well. So overall, I think this is a damn good movie game. Actually, I think it's a fantastic movie game and a really good game in general, and definitely worth your time. Rent it or even buy it for like 30 or 40 bucks when it gets that low in price. So anyway, there you go. There's my review. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you and goodbye.